Have you ever heard of people vanishing into thin air, leaving behind nothing but cryptic clues and chilling questions? Across a remote wilderness and quiet trails, 4 haunting tales of disappearances defy logic and explanation. From a seasoned outdoorsman found in unthinkable circumstances to a child mysteriously traveling miles in the dead of night, these stories challenge everything we know about survival, human nature, and what might be lurking just out of sight. These are not just tales of the missing, they are windows into the unknown, where every detail deepens the mystery. Join me as we uncover the unsettling truths behind these disappearances and ask yourself, how could these vanishings happen? And more importantly, could they happen again?
Dark greetings, love. I am your host of Gothic Sagas, where we share eerie tales of unexplained disappearances, strange occurrences, bizarre accidents, and just plain unsettling, creepy stories. If this kind of content piques your curiosity, hit the subscribe button, terrorize the like button, and ring our bell. So get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's venture into the depths where shadows dance and secrets lurk. Two-year-old Keith Parkins was playing outside with his siblings near his grandfather's ranch in Ritter, Oregon. When it was time for lunch, the children were called inside, but Keith was nowhere to be found. At first, the family conducted a quick search of the property, assuming he hadn't wandered too far. However, when the search turned up nothing, they contacted authorities, launching a large-scale effort to locate the missing toddler. Despite hours of searching, no sign of Keith was discovered near the ranch. Then several hours later, searchers found a trail of small footprints about 4 miles from the property. Believing they might belong to Keith, the team began following the tracks, which led them further and further into the wilderness. Strangely, after continuing for miles, the footprints abruptly stopped, offering no indication where the boy might have gone. The search resumed at first light the next day, and to everyone's astonishment, Keith was found 12 miles from the ranch. He was lying face down in the snow, wearing clothes inadequate for freezing temperatures. His hat and his jacket had been removed and was neatly placed beside him. Miraculously, Keith was alive, but had scratches all over his face and appeared exhausted. When asked what had happened, Keith, being only 2 years old, he could provide little explanation. The only thing he constantly said was that a cat had scratched him. It was the only detail he could recall, and the meaning of the words remained unclear. The mystery deepened as experts considered how a young child could cover such a vast distance, 12 miles, in only 20 hours, especially through rugged terrain and freezing conditions. Les Stroud, a well-known survival expert and host of Survivor Man, attempted to replicate this a few years later. Even with his experiences, he found it nearly impossible to travel that far in the same amount of time, particularly under similar conditions. He concluded that it would be nearly inconceivable for a 2-year-old to make the journey, let alone survive in such harsh weather conditions. Years later, as an adult, Keith was asked about the incident. However, he had no recollection of what had happened to him during those 20 hours. The strange disappearance and miraculous survival remain an unsolved mystery to this day. More questions than answers about what truly transpired that night in the Oregon wilderness. In late 1973, 19-year-old Charles McCullar, an amateur photographer, embarked on a West Coast tour of the United States. His goal was to capture the stunning beauty of national parks. By January 1974, Charles had made his way to Oregon, eager to visit Crater Lake and photograph its majestic scenery. However, Charles' aging Volkswagen van wasn't up to the challenge of navigating the rugged terrain. He asked a friend with an all-terrain vehicle to give him a ride to the park. As they drove, Charles joked that if he didn't return in a few days, his friend should file a missing person report. Tragically, those words would prove eerily prophetic. When Charles failed to return after several days, his friend contacted authorities, and a large-scale search was launched to find him. Search teams scoured the area around Crater Lake, but no trace of Charles was found. His father even flew to Oregon and dedicated months to the search, but despite his relentless efforts, nothing turned up. A year later, two backpackers hiking in the wilderness near Crater Lake became lost after veering far off the trail. While trying to find their way back, they stumbled upon a backpack. Inside, they discovered a distinctive Volkswagen key, which was quickly recognized as belonging to Charles McCullar. The backpack's discovery prompted authorities to search the area, located 12 miles from the nearest trailhead in harsh and remote terrain. Investigators soon uncovered the remains of Charles McCullar. His pants were found draped over a log, unbuttoned, with his socks and foot bones still inside. There was no shoes, no jacket, and no sign of his photography equipment. Nearby, about 12 feet away, they found part of his skull, but the rest of the skeleton was never recovered. The conditions at the time of his disappearance added to the mystery. When Charles went missing, the region was buried under 5 to 7 feet of snow. Given that he was not experienced in outdoor survival, it seemed implausible that he could have traveled 12 miles through such challenging conditions. Even the friend who dropped him off had noted that Charles appeared woefully unprepared for the environment. Authorities ultimately ruled his death as a result of natural causes. However, his family struggled to accept the conclusion. The unusual circumstances surrounding the death, the missing upper body, the separation of his skull, and the absence of critical belongings like his jacket, boots, left many unanswered questions. To this day, Charles McCullar's death remains shrouded in mystery. How he ended up so far from the trailhead in deep snow with no apparent signs of survival equipment or protective clothing continues to puzzle all who hear his story. Six-year-old Dennis Martin, along with his brother, father, and grandfather, set off for a camping trip in the Smoky Mountains, a cherished family tradition for Father's Day. They arrived at their usual campsite, eager to enjoy the outdoors. Their first night went smoothly, filled with laughter and bonding under the stars. The following day, another camper passed by. He noticed Dennis and his brother playing. This man, who had children of similar ages, approached Dennis's father and asked if his kids could join in on the fun. With a smile, Dennis's father agreed, and soon the group of children were all playing a lively game of hide and seek. Dennis's father kept a close eye on him throughout the game, ensuring he stayed safe. he distinctly saw Dennis hide behind a tree and continue watching from a distance. When the parents called for the kids to reveal themselves, all but Dennis emerged. Initially, his father wasn't alarmed. He had watched Dennis go behind this specific tree. After a moment, he called out directly to Dennis and walked over to where he had seen him hide. To his growing concern, Dennis wasn't there. Panic set in as he shouted for his son and searched immediately the area. Before long, he was sprinting through the woods, calling Dennis's name, eventually covering nearly 2 miles along the Appalachian Trail without finding any trace of him. The rest of his family quickly organized a search, scouring the area in disbelief. Dennis had vanished from a spot they had been watching closely. His father repeatedly insisted that he had seen Dennis go behind the tree, but couldn't understand how he could have disappeared so suddenly. What followed was one of the largest efforts in the history of the park. Over 1,500 people, including the U.S. Army's Green Berets, joined the mission to find Dennis, combing through 60 square miles of rugged terrain. Despite their extensive effort, no evidence of Dennis was ever found. No footprints, no clothing, nothing. His disappearance remained an agonizing mystery for his family and investigators alike. Years later, as researcher David Pilatus was investigating cases for his Missing 411 series, he revisited Dennis Martin's story and uncovered a curious lead. He interviewed the Key family, who had been camping nearby on the same weekend Dennis disappeared. The Keys had asked a park ranger for advice where to spot bears, and they were directed to a specific area. While exploring that spot, one of the Keys' children reportedly heard a distant scream. The family looked towards the sound and spotted a figure moving along the mountainside. From their vantage point, it initially resembled a bear. However, as they watched, the father noted the figure's odd behavior. It ran upright like a human, weaving between the trees with an agility not typical of a bear. Even stranger, the figure appeared to be carrying something over its shoulder, which to the horrified observers resembled a small child. The Key family later reported this sighting to the investigators working on Dennis's case, but their account wasn't taken seriously at the time. Officials dismissed it as either a mistake or an exaggeration. It wasn't until Pilates connected the account with Dennis's disappearance years later that the story gained traction. The idea of a bear man carrying a child added an unsettling dimension to an already baffling mystery. To this day, the disappearance of Dennis Martin remains unsolved. His family and many people involved in the search are left with nothing but questions and chilling possibilities. Bart Schleyer was a renowned outdoorsman and hunter. Celebrated for his extraordinary survival skills, he was the kind of person you could drop into the harshest environments, and he wouldn't just survive, he would thrive. Amongst his many accomplishments was spending months in Siberia tracking and capturing Siberian tigers, earning him a reputation as one of the world's top tiger trackers. In September 2004, Bart chartered a float plane to take him 175 miles into the remote wilderness of the Yukon Territory, Canada. His plan was to spend 3 weeks hunting moose solo. With his extensive experience and the right gear, no one doubted his ability to handle the challenge. When the pilot dropped him off, Bart simply said, "Meet me back here in 3 weeks," and disappeared into the wilderness. 3 weeks later, the float plane returned to the designated pickup spot, but Bart was not there. The pilot, knowing Bart's reputation as a wilderness expert, wasn't initially concerned. He landed his plane and went to investigate the campsite, where Bart was supposed to be. The campsite itself appeared untouched, as though someone was still living there. Equipment and supplies were in place and there were no signs of damage. Nearby, the pilot found a dry bag which looked as if someone had been sitting on it against a tree. Next to the tree lay Bart's bow and arrows, arranged in a way consistent with a hunter preparing to call in moose. However, there was no sign of Bart. Nearby, the searchers discovered something chilling: Bart's teeth and a few small fragments of bone. Initially, it was assumed that a large predator, likely a bear, had attacked and killed Bart. But this theory raised several red flags. Bart's friends and colleagues insisted he would never have been caught off guard by a predator. His wilderness expertise and consistent vigilance made him almost impossible for an animal to sneak up on him. Furthermore, the area where his remains were found showed no evidence of struggle. There were no disturbed surroundings, no claw marks, and no signs of Bart fighting for his life, something you would expect in a predator attack. Another puzzling detail was the condition of Bart's campsite. Food was left out in the open, yet no large predator had raided the supplies. If a bear or another animal had attacked Bart, it would have likely have been drawn to the easy meal at the campsite. Instead, everything was untouched. Despite these inconsistencies, the official explanation was that Bart had been attacked and eaten by a predator. However, those who knew him found this hard to accept. The lack of a struggle, the undisturbed camp, and Bart's unmatched expertise in the wilderness all pointed to something far stranger and far more mysterious. To this day, the fate of Bart Schleyer remains an unsolved enigma, leaving those who hear the story to wonder what really happened to Bart in the vast wilderness of the Yukon. And that will do it for today. Thank you for watching and hanging out. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. But until then, blessings and positive energy to you, love.